Okay, I feel like this is gonna be a long one. I think that's just gonna have to be okay. I'm getting the feeling that maybe this is gonna be just as healing for me as it is potentially for somebody else that needs this and might actually want to stick around for the whole thing. But I'm feeling very called to talk about my journey with sobriety, which is so interesting because that is like so fucking old. Like, I have been sober for like 50, off my drug of choice anyways, for 15 years. And yeah, I just feel so specifically that moment of getting sober is what is coming through, and that is such an old chapter that for the most part I feel very far removed from. But this does actually make sense because I feel like some kind of like we all talk about like inner, not we all, but like people in the spiritual community talk about like inner child work and stuff. And something that's been coming up for me recently is like inner teenager work. You know, my teenage years were a doozy. And so maybe it is important for me to revisit this, but I also get the sense that this might be helpful for other people that are like maybe trying to get sober or are newly sober or whatever. This actually came through last night. My daughter came in my room at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and this stuff started. She woke me up and this stuff started to like come through, and I was like, okay, you know, and I thought maybe I'd save it for later, but it was coming through so strong that I was like, oh, maybe I should get up and just go deal with this so that I can go back to sleep. Well, my daughter stayed up until like 5 o'clock in the morning, so you know, I thought I'd wait for her to go back to sleep and then I'd go, but that did not happen. So I was like, well, if it's important, it will have to come back later. And then this morning, you know, I'm going through my morning routine. I always get up, I come down here. This is a time when I'm very receptive, and so it started coming through again. So I'm like, okay, like let's sit down and talk about this, right? And I wasn't quite feeling sure like how much backstory I should give, but I'm kind of feeling like we should go into like a full-on fucking story time mode here. And I kind of feel like this has been a long time coming, but I maybe needed to have like the right, maybe I needed to be able to talk about this in the right way, because people have like asked me about my sobriety before and like how I got sober, and that's always been a very difficult question to answer for people, or like for me to give advice on like how to get sober, because I kind of feel like I was forced to get sober. Like I feel like the hand of God, the universe, or like whatever you want to call it, spirit, was like heavily involved in me getting sober. And there, yes, I had to like walk the journey, and I looking back, it's like I'm realizing that I definitely could have dug my hole deeper if I really had wanted to. So it definitely required something of me to walk the path that I was kind of like forced on. I could have fought it, and so I don't want to completely discredit myself, but yeah, there was a lot at play that really kind of forced me in a certain direction, and I just went with it. And now I'm here and I live a very different life. So yeah. And like I said, I haven't been like sober this whole time, this whole 15 years. I haven't touched my drug of choice in 15 years. But I have smoked weed and I've drank, and you know, I've done stuff since then that that doesn't really get me quite as hung up. And that's not the path for everybody. Sometimes doing something at all is going to throw you right back in there. However, today I am like completely, I don't even know the last time I like drank or something. Like, I just think I've come to a point of accepting that this is just like, even though I've tried to like dabble a little bit with stuff, I just feel better not now. Yeah, it's been a long journey. So let's reel it all the way back. Go back in the way back machine here. So I became addicted to opiates very young, very young. And I was the type of like kid and teenager that you probably wouldn't expect to go down this path. I was a very like I was a good kid. I was good in school. Like, I wasn't really a troublemaker. I kind of looked at the lives around me pretty early on and was like, ain't gonna be me. This is not gonna be my life. And so I put a lot of pressure on myself to get the fuck out of here, right? Like, and so that seemed like that was my trajectory for a long time. However, being in that environment, regardless of whether it was, you know, whether I was the black sheep in it or not, I still suffered a lot of trauma from living in the chaos, right? And so there was some wounding here, and I think that is what ultimately made me very susceptible to this, even though I had no interest in going down this path. And you know, nobody wants to be like, let me clarify, like, nobody wants to be a drug addict. Like, sometimes I really hate the way that people talk about drug addicts, because it's like nobody wakes up one day and is like, I think I'm gonna fucking like be a drug addict and be homeless and like live this horrendous traumatic lifestyle. Like, nobody does that. But yeah, so it started when I was 13, 14. I had a boyfriend that got into a bike accident and like scraped off like his whole fucking face, basically. And they took him by ambulance and gave him morphine in the ambulance, and prescribed him OxyContin, you know, afterwards. And I think that started a problem for him even like before I met him. This happened shortly before I met him. Like, I met him when he still had just like a little bit of like injury left on his face. And yeah, so I think that he that was where it started for him, of like, oh, I like this, you know. And he happened to have access to it. He had a grandparent that was like very ill, and there was just medications everywhere, and he was helping a lot with this whole situation. And so he had very easy access to pills. And so I found out, you know, pretty early in our relationship that he was like using these things, but I didn't really know, you know, I was fucking 14, dude. Like, I didn't know like how bad, like, I think he was already like kind of in deep a little bit, at least deeper than I thought he was. And he's the one that introduced me to pills, to opiates. And also, I want to preface this by like, I just want to say he was not like a bad person. Like, I think he was also just a very traumatized person, and he's actually probably one of the sweetest and most caring people that I've ever dated, and very protective of me. And like, yeah, so I don't want to make him sound like the bad guy at all. We were fucking teenagers, dude, and did not know the rabbit hole that we were going down. So yeah, he like, I remember he just gave me like this tiny little piece of a pill, because it must have been a very high milligram pill. And so we were out one day, and this just seemed like it was supposed to be fun. And this was before like we as a culture really knew like what OxyContin was. Like, this was not a thing that was widely known, that this is basically fucking heroin in pill form. Like, it wasn't well known. So, you know, when he is offering me this pill, like, in my little 14-year-old brain, and living in a culture that has no fucking idea what this shit is, I thought like, oh, this isn't like a drug. This is like, the doctor gives you this, you know, like that's what I thought. I didn't realize that I was like literally trying like hardcore fucking drugs. And so yeah, he gave me like this tiny little crumb, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, what is this gonna do? Well, it did a lot. It did a fucking lot. And I liked it. I liked the way it felt. And it became something that we just did every once in a while for fun. We were teenagers. We were in love. We were experimenting. Like, yeah, it was, for a while, it was fun. It was just a great time. And then it became not, it snowballed, you know? It snowballed into not a great time. There was like, I believe it was over like a Thanksgiving break where we did it every day that whole time, that whole break. So like a week of it. And I feel like that was the turning point of which, like, it seemed like after that, it really started to become less about having fun and more about trying not to feel like shit, like not to be in withdrawal. It was like, I don't know if it actually created a dependence in that short period of time, and because this is so long ago, but I remember that was like the turning point where it seemed like after that, it seemed like when we weren't on them, we were sick. And if you don't know what withdrawal feels like, I can tell you it is like literally the worst I don't even know what to compare it to. It is so uncomfortable. It is like you just want to crawl out of your fucking skin. It is like the most intolerable sensation I have ever experienced, like in my entire fucking life, because it's not even like pain. It's just like I don't even know. Well, anyways, so for a long time, it was really about just trying to keep the withdrawal away. And over the years, it spiraled. You know, I was using these drugs from the time I was 14 to 19. And eventually it escalated to the point of, like, I think that he was buying. It got to the point where it's like, you know, you can only steal so much before someone notices. And because he was helping his grandparents with all of this stuff, like, he had access to his grandpa's checkbook. And so then it turned into this thing where he was like forging checks and getting money to supply us. Because I don't know if you know, but pills are fucking expensive. And this was certainly not something that I, in my 14, 15, 16-year-old life, could fund for myself. Or him for himself. And God, I know this is making him sound like a bad person. We were just lost, okay? We were lost kids. So, like, yeah. So eventually it got to the point when, like, okay, so his tolerance, like, shot up. Like, I feel like I was always, like, he was in control of everything, right? And so I was getting, like, this rationing of it, whereas he had, like, just full access to it. Like, it was this was his thing, you know? And so his tolerance, I think, shot up drastically more quickly than mine did. And so eventually it ended up moving over to heroin. I think that the person that he was getting his pills from, who was, like, kind of also a friend, I think, also had access to heroin. And so I remember at some point, this was a few years in, right? This wasn't like immediate. He came home with that, and it was terrifying to me. And I'm just like, I don't know about that. And I remember he tried it first. I think we just started with smoking it. I always smoked it. I never shot up, thankfully. Because that probably would have been a whole other situation. But I think he tried it first and then basically told me, like, yeah, like, it feels the same but better, you know? And so I tried it, and then that became the thing that we were doing for the next few years. And it just got uglier and uglier and uglier and more isolating. And I somehow, for up until the end, was able to maintain my life. Like, somehow I was going to school, I was getting my shit done, I had a job, like, I was showing up to work, I don't know how I did that for so long, but I did. And then it really did start to kind of unravel towards the end, and I just could not bring myself to do these things anymore. It was like I wasn't going to school, which was so, like, unlike me. Like I said, I was so, like, before this, I was very, like, straight A student, very type A, very like perfectionist. I was on like, I'm gonna go to college. I'm gonna be like, I had like big dreams to just get out of this place that I was in. And like I said, it's like I just kind of found myself down the rabbit hole, like not fucking on purpose. You know, sometimes you can be a good kid and you find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people, or just with other people that are lost, and just like that, you know, you can find yourself tangled up in the thick of it, right? So yeah, everything kind of started to unravel about the time that I was 17, and my mom finally sent me to rehab, because I think she could sense that she was running out of time. You know, once I turn 18, there's really no control over me. So I went to rehab for like probably a little bit over a month. I think that was really important time for me. You know, there were still moments from that time that I remember that stick out to me that I think impacted me, you know. But I came home, and probably within like 2 weeks I was already back at it, you know. I think that, and not to put the blame outside of myself, but I think that left to my own devices, I probably, you know, could have stuck with it, but that newly sober, I think any exposure to the drugs, I certainly wasn't strong enough to say no when it was right there in front of me. And so I think that at some point I had contact with my boyfriend, and I kind of got dragged down along with him again. And I think that's how it went. Actually, that was a thing for a while. Like, we tried to get sober many times. We really wanted out of this for a long time. This was not something that we were like gung-ho about, and it was like this thing where like one of us would bring down the other. It was like one of us would try and get clean, but the other one wasn't in the place, and so then that person would get dragged down with that one, and then like the other person would try and like get their shit together, but then this one wasn't ready. And so it was just kind of like this thing where we were never on the same timeline there. So within 2 weeks, I think I found myself right back at the rehab center. And then when I left that time, I was immediately sent away to my aunt's house. You know, this was a very traumatizing time for me, because I really felt like my mom just kind of didn't really want to take accountability in this moment or be a part of the healing. It was like she wanted to just send me off and like, you fix her and then send her back. You know, it was like there was no recognition of the environment that created this in the first place. And I found out later too, there was a lot of stuff going on at home that I at the time was not aware of, and I think that she needed me like out of the way for that, honestly, because you know, I was the oldest and I was smart as fuck and opinionated, and yeah, I don't think that she could have done what she wanted to do in those moments if I was present, really, not without more difficulty anyways. And throughout that summer, I was just sent from one family member to the other. I was just like tossed around with like no notice, and a lot of times it was like I was blamed for things that I didn't even do. You know, there was some stuff that I did do that I am guilty of, but there was a lot. I think I was such an easy scapegoat, you know. It was like, because I was the drug addict, it was like if something went wrong at somebody's house while I was there, it was like automatically like, you did this. Like, I remember there was one time that like alcohol went missing at my aunt's house, and she like tried to blame me for it, and I was like, I did not. I didn't drink that. And it came out that it was her husband that drank it. After I was already sent away to the next family member's house, I believe it came out that it was the husband that drank it. And I was like, yeah, I told you, you know? And then there was another one where I was like cleaning the house. I was supposed to like vacuum the house, and I assumed I was supposed to vacuum the whole house, so I went into the bedroom and I vacuumed it, and I didn't really touch anything. I literally just vacuumed, and but apparently some money went missing out of the dresser, and I was blamed for it, and all my shit was searched, and yeah, I told them that I didn't take it because I didn't. But I had taken other things around the house, like crafty type shit or whatever, like which wasn't right, but I think I was just like, I don't know, I think I was just trying to like survive and like find things that were interesting to me, and I don't think the plan was ever to like leave with these things either, but I just kept getting like shipped around, you know. And so I think that this wasn't discovered until like I had already been moved to the another place. And I also at the time was taking pills from my grandmother because she had them and I had easy access to them, and I was in the thick of fucking drug addiction. And so because there were things that I was doing that I shouldn't have been doing, I was also blamed for things that I wasn't doing. And so that kind of all, and I can see why they would think like, oh, well, she must have taken the money too, but I didn't. I never like, I think it was assumed that once again the husband took it because from what I know they have like some sort of like gambling problem, and that was a past issue. And so through the grapevine, I feel like, I can't remember how that information came to light for me, but once again, it was not me. It, in fact, was not me. Yeah. So, and then there was another place where I was accused of, like, I was staying in my cousin's room who was, like, young, like, very, like, a younger child, and there, I guess my aunt found, like, ash on the windowsill and like tried to say that I was like smoking in the room, and I wasn't. And she like interrogated the shit out of me and tried to like say, well, like, you know, that how could it be there? I'm like, I don't know how, like, whatever you saw, I don't think it was that, because I was not smoking in there. Anyways, this has gone on a whole side tangent. My point was, it was a very traumatic time where I was being like shipped back and forth a lot, and being blamed for all sorts of shit that I didn't do. Yeah, it just felt like nobody really could handle me or knew what to do with me, and it was just kind of like one burnt bridge after another, whether it was something I did do or didn't do. But eventually I got sent back home to my mom, and everything was fucking different. Everything was different. She had divorced my stepdad, or left my stepdad. She lived in this, we went from living in a house in this like suburban neighborhood to like living in this shitty little apartment in like a not so great part of town. She had like a new boyfriend. Like the apartment that she was in literally didn't even have enough room for all of her. There was 3 of us kids, and I think it was like a 2-bedroom apartment. And it was a fucking, like, disaster of chaos. Like, I think I was, like, sleeping on, like, a mattress in the living room, on the floor, and she was addicted to meth. And this man that she was with was incredibly abusive. And literally, it was like I was shipped off. I left one reality and came back to a completely different fucking world, which in and of itself was incredibly traumatizing. And I just like, I don't know, I feel like I was just kind of like, I don't think there was a lot of thought about what I needed or what to do with me or how it was. Like I was on my own at that point, and I kind of always was on my own, but I was really on my own now. I was really on my own now. I can't remember how this went down because it's all kind of a blur, because it really was just so much fucking chaos. But at some point, I think I was kicked out of my mom's house. If I remember correctly, I feel like she literally handed me like $10 for gas and told me to get the fuck out. And I slept in my car a little bit. You know, I think I went to my boyfriend's and kind of snuck trying to stay there. I think there was like a few different, you know, friends' places that I would like stay at for a little bit, kind of like I was just sleeping over, hanging out. And because at this point I was like 17, 18, somewhere in there. Yeah, I was just sleeping in my car and couch surfing. And people would kind of come out of the woodwork. It's like suddenly I would have like an old friend show up, or someone that was also in the lifestyle, and I would find myself staying at their place for a little bit and using, and then I would have like a family member would step up, or I would reach out or whatever, and then I'd stay there for a little bit, but then it would kind of go south eventually. At this point, a lot of it was because of shit that I was doing, right? It was like they would find out I was using or whatever, and then I couldn't stay there anymore. And so I was just going from place to place, like just burning more bridges. And then eventually my boyfriend went to jail for forging the checks. The bank found out. So his grandfather didn't press charges, but the bank did. And so he was sentenced to a year in jail. And so he was removed from my life, and I was unable to afford my habit anymore. And I think I scrounged by, you know, for a little bit, through other people, like I said, that I knew that were also using, or, you know, I would find something that I could pawn, or like, I can't remember. You get resourceful as fuck when you're like in withdrawal and you're miserable and you're fucking homeless. And like, I was finding ways for a little bit, but it was really touch and go there for a while, and it was a really dark time. And I had hit a point where I'm having a realization that I didn't put together before, and that's a whole separate thing. Anyways, I'm having a realization that the moment I remember there being a phone call, and I called my grandma. This was the one place that I had not stayed. And I don't remember how it got to this point. I don't know if she called me or I called her, but somehow I was gonna go there. And I'm realizing that the moment that happened, I'm pretty sure I was literally in the neighborhood. Like, I remember the circle that I was in when I was sitting on the curb having this conversation with her, or the decision was made or something. And I'm pretty sure I was in the neighborhood that my current partner's family lived in when I met him. So yeah, that's a really weird setting to find myself in at the lowest part of my life, where I was about to turn it around, and what ultimately led me to where I am now. Like, that's weird. I almost feel like that was like a little Easter egg, or like, what an interesting place to end my journey with addiction, you know? It was like this little nod to like where you're gonna find yourself eventually. So anyways, yeah, I was put on a bus. I was put on it's not a Greyhounded, but it's like similar, right? So I lived in Vancouver, Washington at this time, and my grandma lived in Lapine, Oregon. It's like right by Bend, Oregon. And I knew this was my last shot. This was it. I had nowhere else to go. I had nobody else to call. Like I said, bridges were burned everywhere. Everyone had kicked me out. I had I knew, I could feel it in myself, like, especially like as I was riding that bus out there, that I was like, if it's sink or swim time. If I fuck this up, I am done. And I had a moment before this too, and I think this is probably why this opportunity presented itself when it did, is that I remember having a moment where I was like looking in the mirror at myself and realizing, like, I was having this realization of like, oh my God, like, this is my life. Like, I am a drug addict. Like, I'm gonna be a drug addict for the rest of my life. Like, I was in so deep and I saw no way out of it. And I was so tired. I was just hitting the end of my run, and I'm just like, I cannot believe this is where I am, and I'm in so deep and I don't know how to get out. Like, this is gonna be my life. Like, fuck. And so, and that is when I found, you know, this way out kind of presented itself. And I think that's also why I knew it was a way out, was because I was leaving. Like, I didn't know anybody there. I didn't know how to get drugs. I didn't, you know, they weren't on drugs, you know. It's like, I knew that if I left, this was serious, and I had to be serious. And but I also felt like I had no other option. And this is what I mean by feeling like, and I'll get into some more stuff, but feeling like I was forced to get clean, or like the hand of God was heavily influencing the situation, because I had run myself into a dead end. Like, it was, I couldn't see a way to keep going at that time without, like, I don't know, like fully living on the streets, and that was my alternative. So I went. And I remember that first day of being there, that I woke up like the next day, because I had used right before I left my last bit of drugs that I had. And I knew that was going to be the last time. And I remember getting up at their house the next morning and just like sitting on the couch and like having no fucking idea what to do with myself. Like, I was just like, I had been chasing the high and trying to survive and find a place to stay or whatever for so long. That took up my whole day. That was like, it was just always on like the next place to stay, the next fix, the next, like, that was the fucking hamster wheel that I was on, that it was like waking up in this place where I couldn't do that anymore. It was like, well, shit, like, what do I do? Like, I don't even know what to do with myself. But, you know, there were stipulations to being there. I think it was summertime when I first got there, and I think the intention wasn't really for me to ever actually fully stay there. I think, unbeknownst to me, I was on a trial run of like, well, we'll see, you know, we'll give this 2 weeks and see how this goes. But my grandfather was a recovering alcoholic. He had like 20 years or some shit of sobriety and went to AA and whatever. And so, you know, the agreement was that if I was going to stay there, then I had to go to NA meetings, and I had to stay clean. And he took me to find some good meetings, and I was supposed to go, like, I think I had to go like 3 times a week or something like that. Was the requirement for me staying here. And he's like, no bullshit, you know, like, he's the type of person that, like, I knew this was serious. I dealt with a lot of people in my life that had enabled, you know, were enablers, and so you could kind of get one over. And I think that I knew in this situation that it was like, that wasn't gonna happen here. And so I stuck with it. You know, I was given a little bit of like tough love, and like, this is the deal, and some structure. And yeah, so over the summer I did what I was supposed to do, and I spent that time getting crafty and watching TV and resting and really becoming human again. And they let me stay, and I slept on a cot in their office. And as summer was coming to a close, I had to go back to school. You know, part of the deal was that I had to be doing something, right? And I had dropped out basically halfway through my junior year, so I still had like a year and a half to go. And so we tried to go to like the regular high school, and they were like, yeah, that's not gonna happen here. So I ended up at an alternative high school where I could do everything online, and I could catch up that way. And yeah, I finished a year and a half of high school in a year, and I graduated, and decided to go to beauty school. And yeah, I was just kind of like following the next step during that time. I feel like I was kind of given an opportunity, and I was put in a situation where I knew if I fucked up, the alternative was being on the streets with no one in my corner. And so this is why when people ask me about how to get sober or get clean, I don't really know how to answer that question fully, because I hit what was my rock bottom. Some people keep going, you know, some people, they keep going. They live on the streets. They just keep digging. Where it seems like you've hit the bottom, it's like, surprise, you can keep going. And for me, that was it. It was like, I don't want this. And an opportunity was presented in that moment that I knew was no bullshit. And I went into it agreeing to the terms of no bullshit. And about a year into this, my boyfriend got out of jail. I think he also like went to rehab after. I think maybe he started using again or something, and then went to rehab for a month and got out. And my last conversation, it's interesting because it was not that long ago that I actually revisited this conversation, and I fucking called this shit, man. I told him, I was like, you cannot go home. I think because I was a year into my sobriety, and I was recognizing the way that you cannot go back into the environment that caused this problem in the first place. I was trying to tell him, like, you cannot go back there. You cannot. He was about to get out of rehab or something, and we had Facebook messages where I was like, I literally told him, I said, if you go home, you're gonna die. And this was probably like 3 days before he overdosed, and ended up in the hospital on all these tubes and shit. And I found out about it from over fucking Facebook from a friend of his. Nobody bothered to like call me and tell me what had happened, even though at this point I had been with this person for like 5 years. And I'm pretty sure it was unintentional. Just like knowing him, I'm pretty sure that he probably got out of rehab and did a certain amount of drugs that he thought was going to be okay. And because your tolerance drops when you're clean for a little bit, it was too much. And I guess by the time he was found, his brain had been without oxygen for like 40 minutes or something, if I'm remembering this correctly. So I like raced over there, and side story, I remember, I will never forget this. I was in Bend, Oregon, so I'm like there's a mountain between us, because he's over here in Vancouver, and I'm like racing over here over the mountain, and this fucking big truck I don't remember how this started, but I remember trying to pass him, and he would not fucking let me pass him. He when I went to pass him, he would like speed up, and then when I would get behind him, he would slow down so slow, and then when I would try to go around him again, he would like hit the gas and like go really fast. And he just kept doing this to me and was like fucking with me. And I'm like bawling in the fucking car because my boyfriend is literally in a coma in the hospital. And yeah, I will never, like, that person has no fucking idea. Like, he probably just, I don't know what the fuck he thought, but he was fucking with me. Little does he know that I'm a fucking 19-year-old girl who's just trying to get to somebody who's in the fucking hospital, and he's playing this fucked up game with me. So don't do that. on the road. Like, if you're offended by somebody who's like driving fast, or like, and I probably wasn't even driving that fast, like I'm not a reckless person, but I was trying to get somewhere, you know. And it's like, if you're offended by that kind of shit and you want to fuck with people, just know you don't know like why that person is in a hurry. Just saying. Somebody literally could be in the fucking hospital. It could be a matter of life and death, and you are making their life harder. So whoever that guy is out there, fuck you. So yeah, I got to the hospital, and I got there like later in the evening, and nobody was there, and I was able to go into the room by myself, and I knew at that moment that like he wasn't there. He was hooked up to all these fucking tubes and shit, and he was not there. And I remember, it's just so interesting, the timing of things and where people find themselves. And I don't even remember exactly what this man said, but I do remember the moment. There was a bunch of teenagers in the waiting room, you know, because we were all his friends. And I remember there was this old man in the waiting room, and somehow he must have found out why we were there. And he went into this whole fucking speech about how we needed to be there for each other. And if you're struggling, you need to go, you know, go talk to your girlfriend, go talk to your friend. Don't turn to these drugs, you know. It was like this whole pep talk that was definitely like a message from God of like, this is not the way, you guys. This is not the fucking way. It's like making me emotional. Because we were like all so fucked up, you know, like that whole group of kids, like we were all just like so fucking lost. And all we had was each other, you know, but we were all lost. And unfortunately, some of us still are. Some of the people in that group still are. It sucks. I think for me, this was the real moment of solidification for me that like, I'm not going back. You know, it's like from that moment on, I couldn't, I felt like if I ever used again, like lightning was gonna come down and just strike me from the sky. Like it just, for me, it was like I needed to make meaning of this horrendous thing that had happened. And it was like, he was so young, he was 19 years old, and he ended up passing, if that wasn't fucking clear. Yeah, he didn't make it. And I couldn't let his life and his death mean nothing. It to me, it was like something in my soul felt like, well, if I can get it together from here, if I can keep going and use this as motivation to never look back, then his life meant something, you know? It saved my life. And there was a lot of people, and I notice this always happens when people die, there's a lot of people that used it as a reason to keep using. You know, it's interesting the way that people take things. For me, it was like a motivation of like, I'm never going back. Never fucking going back. To go back would be a complete fucking disgrace to him, and this means nothing if I go back. This means fucking nothing. It was all for nothing if I don't do something with it. And thankfully, I think part of the deal was that I had a year clean by this point. And I had been removed from him for a year. We were still talking and stuff, but I hadn't seen him. He hadn't been a part of my daily life, like in person. And so I think that also, because I also think I was protected in that way as well, of like, because I had kind of had some distance from the situation. It was still incredibly fucking painful, don't get me wrong. It still sucked. But I think that just those couple factors there really worked in my favor in order to keep going, whereas some people were still in the thick of it. They were still using at this time, and so getting out probably was quite difficult now that they had, you know, another traumatic reason in their back pocket, to another thing to want to numb out, right? And I know this video is getting really long, but I'm just going to keep talking as long as the channel is coming through. Because even as I'm telling this, and this is probably why, even if this is just for me, I feel like I'm having realizations too of like, wow, this really all did like come full circle for me and just set me on a path, you know. I remember I had a dream. He came to me in a dream. He came to me in a number of ways, honestly. There were a lot of weird moments, but this definitely set up some dominoes for me of like, before I get into that, like, this is, I said this in another video, this is when I really became obsessed with death and what happens after you die. And like, I feel like I could still feel this connection in a way. I think that him and I had spent so much time being pulled apart and trying to get back to each other that I almost feel like we developed this like telepathic connection. I remember having nights where I would just lay there kind of like trying to send a message to him, because I couldn't talk to him really. And so I do think that there was this like almost telepathic connection that we had created. And so even after he was gone, it's like I could still kind of, it was subtle, but I could still feel something. And I remember that there was even a moment that I like had seen something like in the hallway where I was, and yeah, see, I'm having realizations as we go through this. It was the hallway where my grandfather had lost his son to suicide in that house and in that room. And so that's interesting he was younger too. I don't think he was a teenager, but he was very young for, you know, his life to be over. And I had seen like a thing, an outline, it was very colorful. Like, it was weird. It was kind of like an outline of a body and all of this like branching off from the outline that was very like colorful, and it was just like a flash. And so I would have like weird moments like that, and like I said, I was just like becoming very obsessed with death in this moment, and like mediumship, and being able to connect with the other side, and yeah, I was just eating that shit up. Like anything I could find online, or shows that I could watch or whatever, really sent me on a path. And I had a dream one time that he came to me, and we were at the like motocross track. He was really like I said in the beginning, that's how he got into this whole fucking mess, is that he got in a bike accident. He was really into BMX and motocross and stuff. And I can't remember if this is two separate dreams or one dream, but I remember we were looking for his friend. He was like telling me, you need to go find this person. And he wanted me to get on the back of his dirt bike. And I was like, well, are you gonna go fast? And he was like, yeah. Are you coming? And I said yes. And I got on, and we left, you know. And I've looked back at that ever since, because I feel like, honestly, even before that moment, I feel like I've been on a fast track. And somebody said that to me one time too. I had found myself in a situation with these older ladies that I was spending time with at some point, and when they first met me, they saw who I was. Like, they clocked me immediately, and, you know, kind of made some comments about who I was and what my gifts were. And they were like, oh, she's on a fast track. And that specific verbiage I found to be very interesting because of that dream, that like, and I still feel that way. I still feel like the things that I have learned in this lifetime are the rate at which I have grown and learned these things is like, and I'm gonna toot my own horn a little bit, like it's not an ego thing, it's just the fucking reality of the way in which I have been able to absorb and integrate things in this life is really something that I personally haven't really seen a lot of at all in this life. Like there's things that, you know, I learned in my teenage years that people learn in their 40s, you know, 40s, 50s, 60s, or that I think take lifetimes to learn. But I've been guided, you know, I've been guided the whole way. And I think that was kind of the point of that dream of like, I just feel like I've had a really, for lack of a better word, like elite spiritual team here that, and not to go too deep into it because this could go into like a whole bunch of other things, but like that is coming to fruition now, actually, that like I and a group of people are here for a specific thing. And I think it was required that I learn things very quickly, that I pick up on things very quickly to be able to get this done. Which is why I think that things had to happen the way that they had to happen. You know, it was just like boom, 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 boom. And it continues to be that way. It's like I just hit these points where the growth is just like exponentially accelerated. And even when things seemed slow, they were actually moving incredibly fast. And funny enough, this friend that he was looking for in my dream, I think I had ended up coming into contact with not too long after. And that's when I had my first spiritual awakening. I think this was, so yeah, after high school, I went into beauty school. And I did that for a while, and I finished. And that gave me a way to support myself, you know. But I eventually ended up moving back here to Vancouver and found myself in contact with this person. And I think that at this point I had been on like such a long journey too, that like even though I had, you know, found myself obsessed with death and whatnot and what was on the other side, I had hit a point where I was like, there's nothing. This is all fucking pointless. And we just go into the earth when we die and turn into dirt. And there's no God. There's no point to anything. I'd really hit like a spiritual low. And it was in that exact moment that I started experiencing synchronicity for the first time, which was magical and terrifying at the same time. And I thought I was going crazy, and yet it was interesting because for a while I took off with it. You know, I followed it, and I found myself in another dead space kind of moment, which is when I think that these things tend to hit for me. I had moved back here, and I was living with my grandma, and my grandma that lived over here. And I was here for the summer. I think I had decided to go back to school for naturopathic medicine at this point, and I was waiting for fall term to start. So I just had like a summer of like nothing to do. And this is when synchronicity started to hit, and then I had found myself down another rabbit hole of just like learning all this stuff and tapping into myself. This is when I first started like my wellness journey of like I started like doing yoga and like playing around with like alternative healing modalities, which is how I had found naturopathic medicine in the first place, which was something I had never heard of. I started, you know, doing acupuncture and cupping, and like I was going to yoga classes and meditations and like just really exploring into this world. And like I think my body was going through a cleanse too, because I remember I would just stay in my room like literally in meditation like all fucking day long. And I would my grandma had like these water bottles in her fridge, these like big water bottles in her fridge, these refillable ones, And I would grab like 4 of them at a time and bring them up to my room, and I was just like going through water like crazy. Like I feel like my system was really just like cleansing and shit. I wasn't really eating a lot, and I was just drinking water. Went through this like I guess we're gonna tell the whole fucking story. Like we've gone well past the getting sober thing, but I kind of feel like I just want to keep talking. So I don't know if anyone's going to make it this far. Maybe this is a multi-parter, you know, gotta split it up if you want to hear my whole story. So this friend of his, my boyfriend that had passed, had come back into my life, and you know, we had tried to kind of have like something, you know. I at that point was just so in love with him. I honestly had always been so in love with him, and we had a relationship before I was with my boyfriend that didn't end up working out, and I over time found myself with his best friend. It wasn't like this immediate jump. It was kind of like we were a part of the same friend group, and ultimately I found myself with the one that ended up being my boyfriend. And so I never really got to revisit this thing with this other person, but I had just always been so fucking head over heels for him. And so when he came back into my life, it really threw me for a loop, you know, because I think that he was in a place that like he couldn't he didn't feel like he could be with me because I was his dead best friend's girlfriend, you know. And the relationship was chaotic as fuck. I was so nervous around him, and I was also going through this very intense spiritual awakening that I just couldn't quite make sense of, and I was trying to make sense of it to him. And then also he was really in it deep, and I feel like I look back and I should have recognized this, because like I had also been a drug addict, but like he was still deep in addiction, and I don't know how I didn't fucking put those pieces together right away. But he would disappear, you know. It would like he would disappear for days at a time and then come back and like nothing had happened and try and pick up where we left off. And I was so confused by it, because when he was with me it seemed like there was something there was a connection, and then he would disappear again, and it was heartbreaking. And he would be up for days at a time, you know. And I didn't realize that that's what was happening, I guess. Again, I was just young and naive and blinded by just wanting him, essentially. And you know, I would go to sleep and I would wake up and he'd be awake, and I don't know if I was fully putting the pieces together that he never actually went to sleep. And all of it was just so chaotic. And I was trying to get him to see what I was seeing, but he wasn't. And this is when my intuition really started to kick in. I'll never forget this moment. I was in his in his room, and it was like in a garage. It was like a room that was built into a garage, and he was like in the garage working on his bike, and I was in the bedroom. And he had like this like desk thing that had all these little cubby holes in it and stuff, and my attention just like couldn't, there was like one spot that I was like looking at, and I like was feeling so pulled to it, and I like couldn't stop focusing on it. It was just like something was telling me like, you need to go look in there. And it's so interesting because this is when the voice, I think, first came through for me, you know. Like it was like, go look in there. And I got up and I went directly for that spot. Like I didn't go through his shit. I wasn't like searching for something. I didn't even know what was there, but there was like something that was in the square, in the cubby hole, and I just pulled it out, and there was a fucking meth pipe in there. Literally the first thing that I removed and looked at, and it was there, and I was like shocked. And I pulled it out, and he came in the room, and I'm just like, I remember that I said, are you even fucking sober? Like he had been playing it off like he was clean, which I'm fucking dummy for not realizing that wasn't true. But, and of course he was pissed at me. He thought I was going through his shit. And it was like, I wasn't. I really wasn't. Like, I was like magnetized to this spot. And because this is how this shit works. The truth is not hidden for long when you are divinely guided and divinely protected. And that was the piece of the puzzle that I needed to make everything fucking make sense. And then, I remember being stuck there with him after this too. It was like, we couldn't find my car keys. I think he had used my car at some point and the keys were gone. I don't remember. We did end up finding them a few days later, but I was like literally stuck there for like 2 or 3 days with him. And there were like a few moments that I still remember that I just think that there was some sort of work that was being done there with us, and information that that was being shared. But eventually my keys were found and I was able to leave. And I think not too long after that, he ended up actually ghosting me. I remember he went to jail, actually. I think this might have been after. I don't know if this was before or after this moment, but he ended up going to jail. And then I found myself writing letters back and forth and on the phone with him. And I was very much there for him in that moment. I think it might have been after. And it really seemed like he was going to turn it around, you know, and I wanted to be there for him. And I was sending him all of this stuff that I was like learning. And it felt like one of those moments where I might as well have just had it all up on all these papers, all up on the wall and the string. And like, I was having one of those moments with my spirituality and experiencing synchronicity. And like, God was really fucking loud in that time. And I don't even remember the specifics. I just remember feeling like, oh my God, like this, I was on like a fucking acid trip of like reality being so fucking weird and just coincidence after coincidence after coincidence. And like, and I would package up all these papers and send it to him. And so I don't know what he gathered from that time. I'm assuming it must have been something, because it seemed like we kind of ended up getting trapped with each other a few times of like, you know, I'm gonna hold you here to do whatever needs to be done. And yeah, he went to jail for stealing, and he was only in there for like 30 days or something like that. And he got out, and I think he was hitting a point, I think, where he wanted to get better, but I think at that point I was hitting a point where I was self-destructing. Like, I wasn't using, but I was definitely like, my mental health was not in a good place, because one, like I said, I was experiencing all of this like awe, and I was so just in love with him, and I couldn't receive it, you know. I just couldn't. I was feeling so insecure, and like I had to be something else or something more than I was. And I think there were some things that I did to kind of sabotage it, and it just wasn't the time for it, you know. And so eventually he did ghost me. He just disappeared one day, like literally, and which was his MO up until this point. But this time he never came back, and I never heard from him ever again.